I'm delighted to be interviewing Richmond Heath today. He's a physiotherapist, TRE certification trainer, and he's the national coordinator of TRE in Australia. And TRE stands for Trauma Release Exercises or Tension Release Exercises. And we'll explain all that. He's got a background in Pilates, Bowen therapy, mental health, aboriginal studies, and suicide prevention. Now, we're going to be covering all sorts of things today. We had a wide-ranging conversation, but we're going to cover who developed TRE, what it is, how trauma response exercises help activate the body's normal healing response, and why PTSD can show up 6 months after a crisis. Also, who uses TRE, a lot about the physiology of trauma and stress, and a wonderful little interesting thing about hibernating squirrels coming back to life. Hello, Richmond. I'm very glad to have you here. And before we begin, I'll just ask you, where are you in the world?
I'm in a little place called Don Valley, which is in the Yarra Valley, just out of Melbourne in southern Australia.
Very good. Now, tell me a bit about your background and your training and what led you to TRE.
So I have a bit of a diverse and eclectic background. I studied physiotherapy at university. I worked in mental health, suicide prevention, environmental education, in Aboriginal studies, worked in Aboriginal health and wellbeing, and then came back to this field a long time ago now, teaching Pilates. I was doing Bowen therapy, which is like a body-based technique, resetting the nervous system, and then teaching Pilates more or less full time for about 4 or 5 years. And the way I really came to this, there was a few steps. First of all, was I was doing a 10-day meditation retreat, a Vipassana retreat. And on the third one of those that I was doing, my body started to spontaneously move. And that was really the sort of reawakening for me. But at that stage, I had absolutely no context or understanding. And people were just saying, oh, you're crazy, your body's moving, and stop meditating and doing that. But had this extraordinary experience where my body was able to move me in ways I could never do consciously, and releasing tension and bracing and pain patterns that I'd had for 30 or 40 years. But then it was, I don't know, might have been 8 years later or something, someone gave me a DVD, a TRE DVD. I hadn't made any connection, but I put it in the computer, did some exercises, had these tiny little tremors in my legs. Didn't really think much of it, didn't really know what was happening. And then I went to bed, but I woke up the next morning, I describe as like having a different body. I had slept like I hadn't slept since I was a baby, probably. My mind had just switched off. I slept so deeply. And when I got up in the morning, the tension I normally carried in my calves and the pain in the calves, it was like it had all just fallen away. And when I was walking or sitting down, I remember my feet, my heels just felt like they were through the floor. So in that moment, I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't have a context for it, but I knew that this spontaneous movement response was having a profound impact on my nervous system and my muscular system and through my mind. So from that, I started to investigate it and was lucky enough to be in a
I could see that you come from a background of a lot of understanding of the body and how the body works, Pilates and physio. So that would give you certainly some information about the body, nervous system. Yeah.
Look, it gives us one of the difficulties with this spontaneous movement response is our background gives us a model to perceive it through or make sense of it. But the more I do this work, Jean, the less I try to make sense of it or explain it, because there's almost always so much we don't know. And in a way, what TRE does is it explains this spontaneous movement phenomenon through a neuroscientific lens. It's the nervous system and the muscular system or the fascial system, and it's doing this and it's down regulating. And that's really wonderful. But ultimately, at the end of the day, our body doesn't actually really care how we make sense of this or how we explain it. It just needs an opportunity to be able to activate this response. And that's where in cultures all around the world where spontaneous movement is used in all different formats and it's interpreted different ways, it's explained different ways. And what's great about TRE is it's kind of coming at it through this Western scientific lens, which ultimately all it does is it lets us or our ego or our conscious mind say, hey, this makes sense, let's try it. And then once we allow it, we always say the body's leading the process, for want of a better word. So it doesn't really matter in a way, unless our ego or our mind needs to understand it and make sense. But as I say, the more I do it, the less I try to explain it. And it's just like, are you okay? Is it working well for you? And how can we make it work well for you? And then just letting people interpret their own experience, their own interpretations, and then experience the benefits.
Yeah, I guess what drew me to TRE first, I knew two people who were practitioners, and I was curious. It seemed a little odd, but I thought, wow, I love the idea. I had PTSD quite badly at the time. I wasn't sleeping. I was having flashbacks. I was having chaotic thoughts. And I just thought, wow, I love the idea of a healing modality where you don't have to go back and relive the trauma. You don't have to go through the head work or necessarily the emotional work of remembering what you went through, and that you could work through the body. And I think that's a really precious thing, in that it makes the healing process less frightening to begin.
Mm. And that was the real paradigm shift for me through the TRE model, was starting to understand what we would now call trauma. And by that, starting to learn about how the tension and the pain in my body, in all our bodies, is being actively created in the moment, rather than seeing that it's because of some tissue injury or something like that. So that was the big shift for me, was starting to understand, right, well, okay, there's this chronic tension, say it's in my lower back or my gluteal muscles, that squeezing my sciatic nerve, and leg pain and back pain. But why is the body actually creating that tension? When we say, for example, I have PTSD, it's like when I go to sleep at night, why is the body bringing me these embodied experiences of terror and fear? Or why am I hyperreactive? They're not things that we're consciously choosing. And it's not to discount the value of all the cognitively directed and led
Mm.
processes
Yeah.
and therapies that we do, which can be incredibly valuable and important.
Yes.
But often there's a missing link, which is that for want of a better word, our nervous system is activating these responses in the moment now, even though they may not really be adaptive or helpful in the moment, based on unresolved patterns of the past. So the classic thing is, someone says, I have anxiety. And when we say I have anxiety, it's like a noun, something that's inside us, that's stuck inside us. Now, that's how we experience it. But really, when we break that down, what we have is, for want of a better word, the nervous system actively generating a flight response. So it's actively creating this sense of, I need to flee. Now, we call that anxiety, rather than, and by doing that, we think, oh, I've got this condition, and that can be useful. But it's more helpful, I think, for us to understand, right, my organism, my body, my nervous system, my subconscious is actively generating this response within me at the moment. So I like to think of it, it's like a verb. Post-traumatic stress is a verb. Anxiety is a verb. Anger is a verb. It's something the body is doing. And as you say, the beauty about this approach of using spontaneous movement that are generated by the body is that's where all those responses are being generated, out of the subconscious, for want of a better word, however we describe it. And these spontaneous movements are being generated in the same sort of way, or by the same sort of part of our organism. They're not a conscious movement process. And that's why it can start to address these underlying patterns of stress and tension and anxiety and unresolved trauma that we can't always necessarily activate or access, sorry. We can't necessarily access them or regulate them consciously, because if we could, then we'd all just choose to let them go and be completely healed and enlightened, but we can't, because there's a limit to what we can do cognitively. And so that's where adding in this bottom-up, body-based approach to help repattern the nervous system and the neuromuscular system can be so helpful, either as a standalone technique, but also to support and enhance the effectiveness of everything else that we're doing.
Yes, yes. Now I do want to go back and talk a bit about what TRE actually is and where it came from. Can you explain a bit about where trauma release exercises, or tension
Yeah.
release exercises, I should say, what TRE actually stands for?
Yep.
Can you talk about where it was developed from, or how that came about?
Yeah, so TRE originally stood for trauma release exercises, and it was coined as a term and developed as a method by Dr. David Berceli, who was an American, or still is, an American traumatologist who was working in third world and war zone relief. And he had a background in bioenergetics, which uses a lot of this shaking mechanism. And so there's a long history before that. But what he really recognized was the primacy or the value of this shaking response separate to any sort of story or psychotherapeutic interpretation about what was happening. So the common example would be when a dog's shaking in a thunderstorm, that shaking is doing something for the dog separate to how the dog's thinking or what its story is or what its narrative. Again, not to discount the value of the narrative and the story for us as humans. And so by recognizing this primacy, he's just took the tremors out of the psychotherapeutic approach of bioenergetics, for want of a better word, and again, just use some simple exercises to access this shaking and trembling response. So most of us would relate to it. And again, like he did, he was seeing shaking and tremoring through the lens of people who'd experienced extreme stress or trauma.
So he was
So
dealing with refugees and refugee camps. And
that's right. He was originally, when he started teaching it, I believe he was in Lebanon and was teaching it as part of Palestinian-Israeli conflict resolution. So one of the beauties was this shaking response that we all have. For example, if you've ever had a car accident or you get a fright or you're public speaking, the body starts to shake and tremble. And we've all just assumed that that's a symptom of shock or anxiety or fear or nerves without ever considering, in the Western world at least, we've never really considered what is the shaking trying to achieve for the body. And that's where David Berceli was seeing people shaking and trembling in all these different post-traumatic or even acute traumatic experiences. And so originally the lens that he was seeing it through was this sense of releasing trauma, calming down the nervous system, using up the adrenaline, restoring the body to homeostasis.
So instead of seeing the shaking as something negative or something embarrassing that we'd want to stop or interrupt, it's something that's doing a very positive thing for the nervous system that we want to actually allow and encourage as part of letting go of fear or trauma or that tension.
That's right. And that's part of the beauty of TRE is it brings this scientific model to say, hey, look, when you're shaking and trembling after any stressful or traumatic event, that's not helping your body to fight or to flee. It's got nothing to do with that. And it's not helping the body to freeze or immobilize and shut down. So we as a culture, we have misinterpreted, misunderstood, and overlooked and pathologized this. And it starts at a young age. I remember reading books to my children, and in just about every third or fourth children's book, there would be a reference to shaking and trembling. You know, someone was shaking like a leaf, or the ugly duckling was trembling with fear. But we've always just said, oh, that's fear. That is fear. But it's not a part of fear. It's not a part of the body's stress or trauma or defensive response. It's not a part of fight, flight, or freeze. It's how the body is trying to re-regulate itself or restore itself to homeostasis to get itself back to a calm, relaxed place. Now that was
part of healing, not part of.
Absolutely. It's part of the recovery or the healing response. That's right. When David Berceli started, it was TRE. He called it TRE for trauma release exercises because he was seeing it in the shaking phenomenon in that trauma experience and world. And then as it started to expand, it became called tension and trauma release because people are saying, look, I don't have acute trauma, but I've had this chronic neck pain and the tension's falling away. And then these days, Gene, I tend to just call it TRE, like most people don't know what DNA stands for, but you kind of know what it is, or you don't know what IBM stands for, but you know it was the computer stuff. So the value of that then is not limiting the idea that the tremoring is only about letting go of tension or letting go of the past, but it also keeps us open to the possibility that, or the reality that the shaking and tremoring is also about reawakening our body and bringing us back to life or organizing us into the future as well.
Yes. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Now, I've heard of a couple different ways of looking at trauma recovery. And one of them is where you're going back and looking at areas of the body that have shut down or held that tension or that fright or those strong emotions, and you're trying to go back and let go of them. But TRE can also look at those a little differently in a more positive light. Can you talk about that? Reawakening?
Yes, the lens that most of us relate to, because most of us have experienced it or we've seen it, is this idea of I'm shaking and trembling because my body's just had a stressful or traumatic experience. So I've had a car accident and I've seen someone, the body's shaking. So we think, right, this is about calming the nervous system down because it's had a huge, big, rush of adrenaline and activation and arousal. Same with public speaking. My hands are shaking. They're actually trying to calm the nervous system down. So most of us relate to the shaking phenomenon through that lens. And that's, again, that's where the origins of trauma release exercises came from. But one of the other phenomenons where we see this in the animal kingdom, in mammals, is mammals coming back to life out of hibernation. So when a bear goes down into its burrow, or an Arctic squirrel, they go right down into these deep shutdown sort of survival states of the nervous system, where they might only have a heartbeat every 5 or 6, 10 seconds. They might only have a breath every 10 or 15 seconds, and tiny little beats, like just the most efficient use of energy. But when those animals then start to come back to life out of these deep states of survival, sleep or shutdown, the body actually initiates that through spontaneous shaking and trembling. So because we as humans don't hibernate, we don't necessarily see it this way. But when we look at this phenomenon, we start to see, right, in a sense, that if you've got a mammal that it's in its burrow, it's not really under threat. I mean, it is because there's no food. But as it's starting to come back to life, the body starts to shake and tremble. It's starting to restore movement and blood flow, energy flow. So it's literally starting to move the tissues back to life spontaneously before the mammal is even consciously awake again. So this is where how we view this phenomenon in our own body. It's quite common that when we're very stressed and traumatized, our focus and our mindset tends to be very much towards the past. It's like, what caused this? How do I get rid of it? Blah, blah, blah. And that makes sense, because the real key issue we're dealing with here is how our being, not just our conscious mind or our conscious memory, works. Because all of us know that the car accident, the abuse, whatever the traumatic event or events might have been, we all know consciously that that happened and it's finished. We can tell ourselves that there's no car coming towards us right now, but our body's still responding as if that's still happening. So in a sense, when we have unresolved trauma, we are coupled or linked or still connected to those past events at a, let's call it a subconscious or a body-based level. And that shaking and tremoring response is part of the way where the body lets go of that defensive response, or separates or uncouples or breaks that link with the past, so that we can say, yes, I can still consciously remember what happened. But when our memory, either consciously or more importantly, our memory within our body, or muscle memory, for want of a better word, procedural implicit memory, the way the organism remembers, it separates it and says, yes, that happened there. It's not still happening. We don't need to be doing it now. So we don't need to be actively generating these defensive responses, the fight, flight, the shutdown, the hopelessness, and the helplessness. So it's not just that, oh, I've got to change my thinking, because our whole physiology, when we've got unresolved stress and trauma, is still very much connected to the past. And we do need to find a way to separate that, but that's happening at a very subconscious body-based level.
I like the sense of uncoupling. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I found it, frightening, but amazing how the body in flashbacks would recreate the body's sense of terror and of being in a situation that might have happened 10 years before. And when I first read about trauma and saying, you're obviously not there now, but your body isn't just remembering, it's going through, making your body go through that experience again and making it real. So that uncoupling to a previous trauma makes sense, because then you're letting it go in a whole different way, and within quite a sophisticated way in the nervous system. Yeah.
Well, that's right. And one of the things I love is we say, oh, you've got to let it go. Now, the concept of letting something go is going, I have to do that. And that works to the depth that I have conscious control to contract or relax my body. But the limit of that approach, of course, is going, but there's stuff that I can't let go. I like to say, those your listeners, like, just find a part of your body that's holding chronic tension that you are not yet even aware of. Well, of course, you don't know. Now, let that go. I can't. Right. So this is where the uncoupling or the regrounding or the relaxation, or however we think about it, that is happening below the level of our conscious control. And there's this is why tremors and spontaneous shaking, it's not just TRE That's just one pathway of framing it and very much using it in a self-care approach. But there's lots of approaches around the world that use this shaking response. Like I've mentioned, bioenergetics was developed by Alexander Lowen. Somatic experiencing is a trauma therapy where this spontaneous release and discharge is used very, very cognitively and specifically to uncouple these unresolved past events. But you've also got other practices around the world, Katsujin Undo from Japan, the samurai practice, Seiki Jutsu. So lots of different cultures that have used the tremoring in all different ways. And in the Western world, there's lots of elite athletes that are using the tremoring as a recovery response. So I've done my training, I've performed, I'm trying to calm my nervous system, get deeper sleep. But again, building on this whole sense of our mindset, when we're traumatized, we're not in a growth mindset, we're in a recovery mindset.
Mm.
Again, and we often think, oh, that's just because the way I'm thinking, and that's relevant, but it's a physiological sort of pattern in the body. When we go to sleep and our ego's out of the way, we start to have these flashbacks and nightmares. Just like shaking, we think that's a symptom, that's something wrong, that it shouldn't be happening, rather than understanding that's the body, for want of a better word, taking the opportunity to try and reactivate to be able to uncouple or discharge or release or let go of at that unconscious level those responses that are still playing. So nightmares aren't necessarily, they're not pleasant. And yes, they're associated with this unresolved trauma, but they're not completely wrong. They're attempts by the body to recreate in order to unwind or release or integrate those patterns and uncouple. So what a lot of people don't realize also, though, is that all of us shake and tremble, and our bodies shake and tremble and spontaneously move in utero. So up until we started to have ultrasounds and MRIs, we just thought, okay, the baby starts moving at 13 weeks or 20 weeks, whenever the mother can feel it moving. And we tend to think it's awake. We go, oh, look, the baby's awake. It's moving around. But what we can see now through these imaging techniques is that from the very early days in utero, the body starts to twitch and tremble, very similar to what we're saying, that process of the mammals coming out of hibernation, where the tissues are twitching even before they are connected to the central nervous system. And so there's this organic or innate organizational impulse, for want of a better word, where the body that keeps us alive, whatever it is that when we're developing in utero says, put an arm there and an arm there and a head there and start pumping the heart or start breathing when we meet oxygen. Whatever that organic wisdom in the body is also that's generating this spontaneous movement to help not just let go of tension, but for example, to move the body parts in relationship with each other. And it's effectively through movement that we start to have a sense of embodiment, or what we would call our body schema. You know, how do I know where my body is? How do I know if I close my eyes, I can still feel my hands and my arms? It's because they move, and not just my conscious movement, but there's a feedback loop where there's spontaneous movement in the body that helps us become aware of it. So I think I've probably haven't explained that very clearly, but just this sense that innately, when we're in a relatively healed, and they're never perfectly healed, but a relatively calm and safe and grounded place, our organism is naturally designed to be in a state of growth. So that's why when babies are born, as long as the conditions are safe enough,
Yes.
our whole system is naturally designed to be engaging with our experience and what's around us, and to be learning and to integrating and to be growing, not just intellectual knowledge that we learn at school, but physiological growth. And so what we often see is that when people are using the tremor reflex, they start to experience that uncoupling from the past, to not be so past focused, not be so focused on why am I like this? What's happened? What's it called? And naturally their whole mindset engagement starts to come more back to the present moment, but also open up into the future. Oh, wow. I'm starting to notice, rather than just I'm less of this, I'm less stressed, or I'm less anxious. Wow, I'm more confident. Gee, my breathing is a bit deeper when I was public speaking that time. Or wow, I had a little bit more mental clarity. Or perhaps I was writing that, I don't know, piece for work, and I had this insight of creativity. So we can also use this shaking and tremoring response. I mean, we're using it the same way, but to perceive it more in how it's moving us into the future, including how it's helping us train or fall into flow states. And that's one of the things that I found personally in my own life really effective, was that the shaking movements, they weren't just about my body getting more relaxed or more efficient movement or more flexible, but it was having a huge impact on my mind. So it was calming down, I was able to get to sleep, and then I had much more creativity or inspiration in my work. So there's this relevance of what's happening to the past, but there's also how the tremors and the movements are literally moving us into the future as well.
And I could see how that's a good reason to do these healing practices, not just because you've had trauma, but because you want to be more present in life. You want to have that clarity. You want to have that sense of flow in your body. And certainly at times in my life, I've felt very connected, and you might have been young or athletic, where you were very aware of how you used your body and that sense of energy and movement. And other times when you don't, and that healing practices like TRE can help you reconnect with that energy.
Yeah,
and I was talking to my son as well, because when I first did the workshop, my son came with me, and I was talking to him last night and saying, how would you describe TRE? What was your sense of that? And he said, oh, for me, it was like if you've got blockages in your body, energy blockages, where a bit like a dam and a river, where there's all this buildup behind the dam of energy. And you might feel that buildup of energy, but you almost might feel exhausted as well. And there's this confusing sort of mix. And TRE lets go of the blockages, let go of that dam, so that the water can flow, and so that the energy's moving around your body in a healthy way again, rather than being all bottled up and you're feeling that confusion of lots of tension, but also exhaustion that you can get.
At the same time. And this is where one of the things I love about TRE as a model is that, and we often use like you're saying there, so the TRE is letting go of this, or it's changing this, or doing that. So one of the things I love most about TRE is that it's not TRE that's doing the release. That's why I like to use the term spontaneous movement, or neurogenic tremors, or autogenic movement. And because one of the great gifts of David Berceli, who's founded TRE, was that he was traveling around the world and he was seeing the shaking phenomenon in all different cultures and religions and in all these different interpretations. And so that was where he was going, look, the human body is shaking and trembling regardless of your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your income level, your skin color. It's irrelevant to that. It's an innate process for all of us. And so the TRE was originally, David was using a whole set of exercises to fatigue and stretch the body. Like all of us, if you've held a plank or you've been to the gym and you start to get those trembles or that shaking, and we've all been told, as a physiotherapist, I always was told by my elders, this is just a sign of weakness, fatigue, and lack of control. But in TRE, what we do is we use that muscular fatigue tremor to open the doorway to this, what we call neurogenic, as just a sort of almost a made up word to say the nervous system is generating the movements. I'm not doing them consciously, or I like the term autogenic, meaning they're just automatically being generated because it's more than the nervous system. And so David was seeing this phenomenon. And even though he said, look, this is the way we're going to do it, this is the way we're going to talk about it in a Western world, the key thing is that it's not really TRE. TRE is just a technique or a set of exercises or a pathway or a framework or a scientific view of looking at this phenomenon. But the autogenic movement, or the movement phenomenon, or the wisdom of the body, or the life force, or in other cultures, kundalini or ki or prana, whatever that is that's moving us and animating us, that's ultimately what's doing the process. So one of the things I love most about TRE is this sense of honoring that spontaneous movement that's in every single human mammal, and not getting stuck in saying this is what it is, or this is how it is, or it's TRE that's doing it. TRE is just a doorway that lets us access this response, which is innate inside every single person on the planet. And if we're teaching it well and doing it well, it gives us that framework that then allows people to experience it, to regulate it so they can use it themselves, and ultimately then interpret it themselves in whatever whatever religious or scientific or whatever their worldview and their belief system and their experience is. It's really entirely.
Yes. Yeah. I remember reading discussion or about, I don't remember what culture it was, but it was saying that after childbirth, that midwives would support the mother in trembling and shaking afterwards. And if she did, she'd recover from the birth much faster from the pain and the stress of going through childbirth. And I thought, wow, okay. Certainly if you did that in a Western hospital, they'd go, oh my gosh, she's having a seizure. Stop this, give her some drugs, interrupt this. But I found it quite hard to recover from birth, and I found it the pain rather frightening and fairly traumatic. And I just thought, wow, what if somebody had allowed me that space and stood with me energetically, been with me, so that I could have had the space to feel fear or feel that tension or be there and allow that to release from the body in whatever way was the body wanted to do. And I could see how that would, if it was culturally supported, that would be so much more healthy, because then it would be over and you just move on rather than feeling that stuckness or that leftover whatever. Yeah.
That's entirely right, because this shaking and trembling has been completely pathologized and stigmatized in Western culture. And the sad thing is, Jean, that it's not just that we're missing out on going, oh, wow, there's this natural thing that can help me recover. What's sadder in a way for me is that by suppressing or inhibiting this shaking response, first responder comes to the scene of a fire or whatever, their body starts to shake and tremble. They think it's a sign of PTSD. They think it's a sign of losing control. They're weak, blah, blah, blah. When we suppress that shaking or that tremoring that's wanting to happen spontaneously, it's not just we're missing out on that recovery response, but we're actually preventing the body from healing or releasing or letting go. And inadvertently, we're increasing the likelihood that we're going to have unresolved stress and trauma or post-traumatic stress or burnout or chronic anxiety. Yeah. And again, it's not to suggest that, oh, if we all just shake, then everything's perfect and the world's going to be entirely healed. So it's not to say it's a magic bullet or a silver bullet, but the sad thing is that the way I like to think about it sometimes is like the tremoring is the emergency exit in our body. And when we don't allow that emergency exit, when we are in stressful and traumatic experiences or afterwards, we can't actually get back to that fully resolved places. And the research has actually been very clear from back in the 70s. If after a traumatic event, your physiology gets back to a calm and relaxed homeostatic state, so not just consciously, but your heart rate variability, your respiratory system, if that all restores and gets back to calm and relaxed, then effectively it's over. We're highly unlikely to develop post-traumatic stress at that physiological level. But unfortunately, for most of us, if we do start to shake and tremble, when we suppress that, we're preventing that recovery response, and we're almost creating this sort of double bind situation where our body can't actually restore us back to a relaxed homeostatic state where the body says, yes, that happened. That was terrible. I had to go into this huge fight, flight, and freeze response. I had to shut down. I had to go into deep survival mode. And then my body was allowed to come back out of it and restore the movement, come out of that immobility response. And it's over. When we don't do at a very simplistic level, that's what leads to chronic stress, anxiety, and unresolved trauma.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now, tell me a bit about AFL footballers who are using TRE. Can you talk a bit about other groups or places that you've seen it used?
Yeah, so look, I mean, in Australia, there's some AFL footballers, there's Olympic athletes, bronze, and I think there was a gold medalist winning athlete. There's elite volleyballers, professional surfers. And some of them are using TRE, some of them are using other techniques, but they're all ultimately around the same phenomenon, which is the spontaneous movement reflex. And then TRE more specifically is being used by elite soldiers in the US, so part of their training. And at the end of the day, the process is no different. People lie down or they do an exercise, their body starts to shake and tremble, and then they let that happen. In the context of sport, people are saying, hey, this is helping me sleep better, or switch off and get to sleep after, if I'm a soldier. Wow, I'm sleeping better. I'm recovering better. I'm not getting that post sort of session pain or difficulty, or I'm getting more flexible. So it's really, again, just the lens that people are looking through it, because a lot of athletes, if they keep doing that, will say, I'm becoming more grounded or more calm or more centered or more present inside myself. Therefore, my decision making under pressure is getting better. It's not just about recovery. Or they might be saying, gee, when I hold my arm in a certain position, or I'm doing weights and my body is trembling that way, I'm finding that I've got greater range of movement in my shoulder. Wow, that means that when I'm spiking the volleyball, I can spike a little bit harder. Or when I land, I'm more flexible and I'm not getting my ankle injury. So it really just comes down to the way we are interpreting, or what we're looking for out of it. Because most of us who are using it in the general public just want to feel a bit more stressed. I want to feel a bit more alive. I want to be a bit more calm and relaxed. I want to be a bit more creative and happy. And it's an ongoing journey. It's not, we use the tremors and then all of a sudden life's perfect. I equate it to when you go to the gym. It's like, wow, I did a gym weekend. Oh, I did 6 hours of gym work. Fantastic. Now I'm strong forever. No, we're a living, pulsating organism. So it's something that when we do it, it just starts to become a normal part of our life. There's anything else.
Yeah,
I like to say,
I
brush your teeth and shake your body. Like it becomes part of normal life. And often we'll find that the shaking and trembling response becomes more enlivened or awakened or more active. So rather than going, gee, I've got to lie down and do all these exercises to get to the fatigue point, to get the tremoring to happen, we get a bit of sad news. Something happens, someone's passed away. And instead of carrying that grief and that state of shock, we might start to cry, which is the way our diaphragm tremors and releases, and we might tremble. And so then instead of going, wow, I've got to process the shock, I've got to talk about it, I've got to think about it, which may still be relevant. But when our physiology is, when we've reintegrated this response, it just becomes part of our daily life. Like anyone who's got a dog, how often do you see a dog do a little tremble?
Yep.
All the time. A horse
Yeah.
falls over, it gets up, it trembles. You see ducks
Yes.
fighting on the
Yes.
water, they flap their wings. And in
Yes.
our Western culture, shaking and trembling has been pathologized. It's either a neurological disorder like Parkinson's or associated with something like that, which is a separate kind of tremoring. Or we just say, yeah, that's a sign of anxiety or PTSD or social anxiety. So it's so stigmatized that for a lot of us, the key thing is just taking away that stigma that we've all just been told this is what it is, because that's what my parents told me, that's what my school told me. When my hands were shaking in class as a little boy doing some presentation, they just said, oh, you're nervous. No one said, yes, you are nervous, but that's shaking. Fantastic. Please, let's get that shaking going more. This is going to calm you down. It's going to bring you back to life. It's going to switch your brain back on. It's going to bring you out of yourself. We're all like, oh, that's a sign of vulnerability, anxiety, and we've got to shut it down. In the great wisdom of our Western world and our Western medical model, we've just completely overlooked and misinterpreted this response, with sadly quite dire and significant consequences for us.
I can see how it makes it worse. I remember once, oh gosh, it was probably 15 years ago, I was having some stitches in a doctor's office and I had a small seizure and I was fine with it. I knew I was stressed in a doctor's office and I knew it was a response to that. Scared the doctor to, oh my. I had to calm the doctor down and I said, hey, no, this is okay. About once every 10 years, I have something like this where, I have a seizure and I know I'm scared. I'm in a doctor's office. I feel vulnerable. You're doing something that physically hurts. And it was a release of tension. And I had to convince them to, no, I don't need medication for epilepsy. This is healthy. And it's not a crisis. It's actually a good thing. It's a healing, a releasing. And it worried me that the doctor couldn't see it that way when it was a body response.
That's right, because it's only in recent years that with TRE and other modalities that they're starting to go, hey, let's study this phenomenon where the body is shaking and trembling, and it's not a disorder of the nervous system, or it's again, we didn't have that language. It's like if you're shaking and trembling, it's, have I got Parkinson's? Am I having a seizure? Have I got epilepsy? So when we don't have that lens, well, then of course this is what we see, rather than someone going, oh, fantastic, you're having this discharge. But even then, Jean, like It was the Swahili midwives that you were talking about who keep women
Okay.
standing after birth. But even in traditional cultures, the Kalahari Bushmen, if you've ever seen the film The Gods Must Be Crazy, that's the people who are in that film. Part of their key cultural identity is they call themselves the keepers of the sheikh. So they deliberately use this as a regular part of their health, healing, well-being, community gatherings and ceremonies. So again, even still in a Western mindset, we see the shaking and we say that tremoring, it's a positive thing, but it's only a positive thing to try and recover from a negative thing. It's a trauma release thing. Whereas the Kalahari Bushmen might interpret that and they'll say, wow, that's shaking. That is that, I can't do their language where they click their tongues and that, but it's like nyom or something. I don't know how to say it. Effectively translated like that is the great spirit entering that body and bringing it to life and healing it. So it's not even a negative. So if someone's starting to shake and tremble, instead of going, oh, yes, you poor traumatized thing, at least that's helping you recover, they're going, wow, look at the spirit in that body. Or again, in Christian evangelical churches, the Quakers and the Shakers, this is the Holy Spirit entering. It's not a recovery thing. There's this some innate life force. Now, again, the beauty is we don't really know, and cultures interpret it through their own lens. Again, and the great gift of David Berceli was to say, hang on, this is actually something that's common to all humans. And we're all interpreting it different ways, which doesn't negate the way we're interpreting. It doesn't mean it's not the Great Spirit or the Holy Spirit or it's not trauma release. But this is why I say at the end of the day, even though the neuroscience is so helpful so that I could let go and make sense of it and understand it, it keeps my ego happy. The more I do it, it's like my body doesn't care two hoots whether I understand it or how I explain it or whether I research it. It just wants an opportunity to activate it. And that's why it's what I love about TRE specifically is even though we can use it therapeutically or in the clinical setting, is that once you learn it, you've got this method to access this phenomenon for the rest of your life. So that's what I'm most passionate about it. You don't have to come and see me. I don't have all the knowledge and all the wisdom. I've just got to reframe the shaking and tremoring, teach you how to access it, teach you how to regulate it so you can go, I'm in control about how much I let go of control, how to integrate it into your life so you can see, wow, this is a progressive journey of healing and growth. It's moving me in the right direction. It's probably not going to make me enlightened and perfectly healed tomorrow. But if it's moving me in the right direction, keep doing everything we can, all the cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, Pilates, yoga, eat the right food, everything we're doing, but just add in this shaking phenomenon because it will underlie and support and enhance everything else we're doing.
Yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah. Yeah. And I saw a quote somewhere, I think it was Davidson, and he was saying that we heal at the rate of the body, not at the rate of the ego. And
that was David Berceli. That's
oh,
right.
okay.
That was David Berceli. He's got lots of great quotes. But again, it was just that sense of we don't heal at the rate of the ego. Otherwise, I would just say, okay, activate your ego, turn it on, now heal, fix everything, become enlightened. So this is where, again, it's not to discount all those things that we do, because even if you tremor for 20 minutes every day for the rest of your life, you're still going to have another 23 and a half hours or longer where you are either asleep or consciously, the way you think, the way you move, everything you do is going to have an effect. So this doesn't negate or overrun anything else that we're doing, but it's a missing link because, as David says, there's a limit to what we can achieve and do consciously. And so we want to combine those approaches, that top down, I'm trying to create a certain way and want to learn to use my breath to consciously calm my down or move. Fantastic. Absolutely do that. But when we let the body pull in the same direction and we let that lead us, we get a whole extra layer. I describe it's a little bit like turbocharging whatever your health and well-being treatments and practices are. It's like adding this extra little bit of oomph that we can't do consciously.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I see with TRE, it's not a switch that you turn on, that it's really a process where you're retraining the nervous system to connect with your body, be embodied, and to be healthier and to allow that energy to move through you. But like learning to play the piano, it's not something you do once and you're done. You do it, you redo it, you redo it, and then you get better and the body gets used to that. And the process of TRE is retraining your nervous system. And yeah, and to understand that you're working with your body.
Yeah, that's right. And in TRE, the term we tend to use is follow the body. So at least while you're tremoring, because most of us are all about control and we're trying to create the outcomes in our body or our breath or our life or our world or our jobs or our relationships that we think are the best and what we need. And so for this little period of time, using the tremoring is about letting go of that. So instead of lying down and saying, I'm going to make my shoulder feel better, I'm going to make this healed, which you can do. You can use your consciousness or your cognition during the process. But what we tend to miss, especially in Western world, is that sense of, hey, let's let go and surrender. Let's fall into the flow of life and let the body lead the process, because all that tension or pain, chronic pain patterns, we're not doing it consciously. So the body's generating it, for want of a better word. So we just say, let's let the body, give it an opportunity to unwind that or stop generating that or do what it wants to do in its own wisdom, in its own time. Because it's like we're learning to, if I've lived in a body that's chronically braced and held, and that's how I survive life and feel okay in the moment, if you take all of that defensive tension and bracing away, I might be completely freaking out and just feel so vulnerable and open and everything's affecting me. So there's an innate wisdom in the body of unwinding those patterns in their own way and in their own time. So yeah, it's really about giving that body an opportunity to lead us. And as I say, what I love is that experience of flow state. So starting to develop wisdom or maturity in our body, in our physiology, and in our mind, that sense of not trying to be in control of the world all the time, not discounting where we can have that, but learning how to follow and support and to become much more present. That's what I think is a key thing. We talk about embodiment, which is about being in the body and having our body. If our body's not moving, if my neck and shoulders are not moving, I'm not getting that feedback into my conscious mind. So the more embodied and present we are, the more we can then experience life, because it's our body that's sensing everything around us first and foremost. So yeah, it's very much, again, what I'm passionate about and what I love about it is because you can learn the technique to access the phenomenon, then you can use the phenomenon on your own. You've got it for life. You don't have to see me all the time. You don't have to see the therapist all the time. They can be really valuable and helpful to progress the movements in the body. So not discounting that, but ultimately it's already inside every one of us. And if we keep using it, we'll naturally start to organize us or mature us or heal us or evolve us or grow us as we go in conjunction with everything else we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. I've just got two questions left. With PTSD or with some traumatic event, the symptoms can sometimes show up 6 months later or something. What's happening in the nervous system with it sort of appearing later?
Yeah, look, it's a really good point, because just trying to think the easiest way to keep it really simple is when we go into a traumatic event, there's kind of two main things that happen. One is there's a creation of immobility, so stopping movement, and that can either happen through the body muscles either contracting and holding tension or collapsing and not moving at all. So there's the immobility response. But along with that immobility response is what we would call a disconnection or a disembodiment. So literally, as the body's not moving, there is a splitting or a separation between what the body's experiencing and what my conscious mind is aware of. The good old example, the saber-toothed tiger's chasing me across the savannah. It catches me. It starts to eat me. I don't want to feel that. My organism doesn't want me to have to feel that experience necessarily. So again, not consciously, but in the subconscious or at a nervous system body-based level, there's a sort of separating or a splitting off. And people would have the experience of, like, I was on the operating table and then all of a sudden I'm floating above my body. There's a separating. Now, how that phenomenon happens and how we interpret that is, again, comes through whole lots of different lenses. But there's this experience where part of the trauma survival response is to numb us out or to disconnect us or shut us off from consciously experiencing those things that are, by definition, they're traumatic because they're overwhelming, more than my conscious being can actually experience. And so then if we're not coming out of that experience over the other side and we're not able to move back down out of that immobilized and disconnected or disembodied state, it's not until we start to come out of those states later on that we start to re-experience more vulnerability or more movement. So the classic model would be, if you're a soldier and you've been deployed overseas into a war zone, it's normal and healthy to be partly disconnected from the terror of that experience so you can do your job. And so it's often not until people come home and then all of a sudden they're in a safe environment that the body says, we don't need to be in this constant traumatic, hypervigilant, defended, shut down survival state. It's time to start healing. And so as that process happens, then they might start to go, wow, I'm feeling more anxious or I'm feeling more angry. At that point in our Western model, we say, oh, that's a symptom of PTSD. You've got PTSD. But that process didn't start 4 months later when you started to feel anxious. It happened at the time of the traumatic event. It's just that the trauma response, again, in its organic and innate wisdom, so we're not overwhelmed at the time, is to have us disconnected. And that's why we say it's carried in the body or it's stored in the body or however you want to think about it. It's like that patterning is there. And it's not often until we are on the healing or recovery process that we start to reconnect with the unresolved reality inside. So for me, Jean, I was someone who was always high functioning, but it wasn't until I'd started this TRE journey, and before that, my body had started to shut down. I had chronic shoulder pain and ankle pain and back pain, so I couldn't exercise and do all the things I used to do to make myself feel better, which was basically exercise and sport. And so I was forced to, and this is the thing, it doesn't catch up with us until weeks, months, years, even decades later. I was forced that I couldn't just keep exercising to make myself feel good. And when that happened, I felt terrible, lots of depression and anxiety. And as I was doing the tremoring the first couple of months, I would tremor and it was just like magic. My brain would switch off, my body would completely relax. And it was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. But over a period of weeks, months, and still ongoing, I started to become much more aware of how anxious I felt. And I love to tell a story. After a couple of months of doing TRE, I was standing at a workshop talking to someone. And I don't know how, I just noticed that I felt tense. I wasn't feeling anxious. I just felt, gee, I'm feeling a bit tense. And I took a breath. And as I breathed out, my pelvic floor, my bum literally felt like it let go and hit the floor. I literally turned around and went, holy shit, because my muscles had let go so much. Now, I didn't even know that those muscles were tight. I just felt a bit tense. I wasn't connected to them. Now, the reason I share this story is so my pelvic floor, my bum squeezing on and off became like a light on the dashboard where I go, wow, I don't even know that I'm anxious. I don't know what I'm feeling. All I know is I've got tension. And so that was the first step for me of becoming aware of going, wow, well, why is that tension there? I don't know. I'm not feeling any emotions. And then I don't know, it might have been a year or two later, as my pelvic floor had started to be more relaxed and my bum wouldn't squeeze on all the time. I remember walking into a meeting with a group of my closest and dearest male friends that we were organizing a men's gathering. And I was having this great day. I felt so alive and awake. And then I walked into the room and there was a few guys already sitting there. And the next thing I knew, I was like, I've got to go to the toilet. And I got to the toilet and I'm like thinking, oh my God, I'm feeling really scared and anxious, even though intellectually I'm going, these guys know everything about me. These are the safest people in the world. So I'm thinking, wow, that's extraordinary. So what I'm saying there was I didn't know that bum squeezing on, those muscles squeezing on and bracing was actually containing this underlying vulnerability or anxiety until lots more tremoring, that muscle had relaxed. Then I started to become aware of, wow, I've got this anxiety. So I was there at the toilet. Oh, it's all right. I've relaxed. It's okay. I walk back into the room. I'm calm. I get halfway to the group of men. I see them sitting there again. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got to go and do the dishes. I just had to walk away and get away. I'm like going, this is ridiculous. Why could I be feeling so anxious? These are the most loving, supportive people in my entire world. And this is, again, why if we only look at things cognitively, we don't always have a story. Even if we do have a story, we're not going to have stories for stresses and traumas in utero or intergenerational. The point of the story was that the healing journey is not always a linear journey. When we've been disconnected from our body, my shoulders are holding tension, my stomach's squeezed in, my diaphragm can't breathe fully. There's a reason why that's there, because the body's in this perpetual state of bracing. And as we start to restore the movements, sometimes, not always, sometimes we become more aware of, well, why was that tension and bracing there in the first place? Because it was meaning that I didn't have to feel so stressed and anxious, because at that stage, I didn't have the capacity to make sense of that or integrate that or cope with it or recover or move through. So this is an important factor where, exactly like you say, it's not until weeks, months, years later that those symptoms show up. Because in the short term, disconnecting from the body in a traumatic experience is a highly adaptive and functional process. It's a survival response. But when we don't allow the recovery phase and the body to shake and tremble its way back to a calm, relaxed state and literally come out of those states, that's where that chronic activation of those patterns starts to become, I would say, maladaptive or dysfunctional. It's not until months and years later that tightness in my shoulders starts to create neck pain, or my tightness around my sacrum and all those muscles around my piriformis and the back of my gluteal muscles, they start to generate secondary symptoms. Oh, I've got chronic pain, or I've got this back pain. And then, unfortunately, in our model, we often will treat the symptoms. Oh, it's because you've got this tight muscle, rather than going, well, why is that muscle even tight? Anyway, it's a long-winded answer, but it's just around this sense of, we often don't notice how stressed and traumatized we are until we start to reconnect with the body. And this is why can be so valuable and helpful of getting a bit of theory and a polyvagal informed, nervous system informed model of the tremoring, because we can say, right, okay, I'm feeling more anxious, or I'm more aware of how angry I am. The tremoring is not putting that in there. It's not creating anxiety.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. I've been carrying this anxiety, for want of a better word.
Yes.
And so that just helps us go. That's the first step on the journey. Sometimes, not always, is, wow, I'm more aware of this. But then if we keep tremoring, the body can release that as well. And we're like, oh, okay, I can get through these patterns. I can connect and be moved through these patterns to be a bit more calm, relaxed, resolved, integrated, released on the other side.
Yeah. So its layers of healings may uncover all sorts of emotions that have been held on to for ages. But
absolutely,
if those are appearing, it's not a bad thing. It means your body is ready to release that. And it's another layer of healing rather than a layer of pathology, I suppose. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's another layer that the body's about to let go of, but in order to let go of it, it also needs to develop a new way of coping or being grounded and present in that moment. So it's always
so instead of just saying, darn, there's more anxiety. And I suppose in the situation you describe, the anxiety may have come up because you felt safe, because your body allowed yourself to feel that, because you were around people who loved and supported you, and you were comfortable there, and your body said, oh, he's going to be just fine in this situation. Right. We can now let him feel that old stuff, that we can let it go now. So.
And that is where the kind of the model and the lens and the perspective and the therapeutic aspect of it can be really helpful, because if we start to feel more anxious, like if we start to shake and we go, this is wrong and bad, if we start to feel more anxious, or we start to feel more angry, or we start to feel more overwhelmed, it's really easy to go, this is wrong and bad. My ego doesn't want this. I just want to feel better. I just want to give me the drug, give me the surgery, do whatever. But that's not how we actually heal and grow. And again, this is very much a Western phenomenon, that we've really lost this integration of how we heal and grow through trauma, like the seasons of trees or pruning roses. Like, we often don't have that. And so that's where it can be really important. If you're tremoring and you're going, wow, things are coming up, or I'm feeling more of this, that, or that's not making sense, then there's TRE providers all around the world who can help and support you through that. And again, we've got countless other therapies and approaches and modalities that you might say, wow, this specific memory or trauma or thing that happened came up. I need to go and work with that consciously or cognitively or psychotherapeutically or relationally. So it doesn't take away from any of that, but like an antivirus program, the tremors will tend to find and unwind whatever it is that our body and our being is ready to heal and grow through.
Well, that just leads to my last question, is if we've got people in the US or Canada or around Australia, how do you find practitioners, or how do you find workshops in TRE?
Yeah. So look, there's two things. The first thing is that during COVID, I created a online course where probably the majority of people, as long as you don't have any major medical or mental health conditions or major trauma sort of history going on, can actually learn how to do TRE, learn the basics of it through a free online course, and that's just at trecourse.com, or you can get links to that through the Australian TRE website, which is just treaustralia.com. And in Australia, you've got treaustralia.com, but globally, there's lots of different countries have their own, their own website. So you might look up TRE Switzerland or TRE Norway and Google that, you'll probably find the local thing. But globally, if people go to traumaprevention.com, that's where there's a listing. And not everyone is listed there, but there are, I think there's something like 80, 85 countries that there are TRE providers in. As I say, the huge percentage of people can learn TRE without necessarily needing a provider, but sometimes people would prefer to. Sometimes people do need that. So on my free online course, there's a screening tool that says, look, if you've got this, you're probably going to be fine. And if you watch a few videos and you feel really confident, you've got no concerns, well, then you're probably going to be absolutely okay. Whereas other people might see the shaking and think, wow, that looks a bit scary. That feels a bit out of control. Or, gee, that reminds me of how I was shaking after that hugely traumatic experience I had. So that's where providers can be really, really valuable in introducing the tremoring. But then once you are tremoring, providers can be really helpful to actually facilitate the movements and deepen the process and help your body move in ways that it may not move on its own, by supporting the body or releasing parts of the body, and then supporting you on your own ongoing journey. So yeah, I just encourage you to check out either of those resources, treaustralia.com, traumaprevention.com, and links through to the free online course. And if you do use the course, please, the best way you can thank me for it is to share it with other people. It's a resource for you and your listeners and for your list community and clients and family and friends. The more people who get access to it, the better.
Well, thank you very much for creating the course. And I really appreciate the resources and also the explanations and stories. That's been really helpful. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jean. Thanks for having me.